Spring break. It's the time of year when students across the country head to popular vacation spots to let loose, relax, and enjoy the freedom that comes with a break from school. Sun, sand, and the thrill of a new adventure await. But sometimes, what seems like an idyllic getaway can take a dark turn, turning carefree fun into a fight for survival. These are 4 true spring break horror stories that will make you think twice about planning your next trip. These are stories of terror, of close calls, and of unexpected twists that no one could have predicted. Spring break was a time for college students to escape the stress of exams and papers, to seek refuge in the warm sun and lazy beach days, and to create memories they would look back on fondly for years to come. For Sarah and her friends, it was no different. They had booked a beachfront hotel in Cancun, Mexico, a place known for its vibrant party scene, crystal clear water, and bustling nightlife. The excitement of the trip was contagious, as they anticipated days full of fun and adventure. The first few days of the trip were everything they had imagined. They spent the mornings lounging on the beach, sipping cold drinks, and swimming in the ocean, while their nights were filled with dancing, music, and laughter. But as the days passed, something started to feel a bit off. It wasn't anything overt, just a strange sensation, like an itch you couldn't quite scratch. Sarah, in particular, couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She brushed it off at first, thinking it was just the excitement of being in a new place. One evening after a long day of partying, Sarah decided to take a break from the festivities. Her friends were heading out again, but she felt exhausted and opted to stay in the hotel room and relax. It had been a hectic few days, and she needed some quiet time to recharge. Her friends agreed to check on her later in the night, and with a nod, Sarah locked the door behind them as they left. The hotel room was small but cozy, with a bed large enough to stretch out on, a TV, and a small balcony with a view of the ocean. Sarah sat on the bed, picked up her phone, and started scrolling through social media. She had just returned from a brief nap when she realized it was later than she thought. The door was still locked, but the blinds were slightly open. She hadn't opened them, so she assumed the wind must have moved them. As Sarah sat up and moved toward the window to close the blinds, she heard a faint rustling sound. It came from the direction of the bathroom. At first, she thought it was just the wind again, or maybe a loose item in the room, but then it happened again. A soft, deliberate rustling, followed by the faintest of creaks from the floorboards. Her heart rate quickened. Trying to dismiss it as her imagination, Sarah called out, "Hello?" Her voice was shaky, but there was no response. She stood still, listening for any sign of movement or sound, but it was quiet. Almost too quiet. She began walking slowly toward the bathroom, her footsteps muffled by the carpet. She told herself it was probably housekeeping, though they had already cleaned the room earlier. Still, her instincts told her to check, so she approached the bathroom door and gently pushed it open. To her surprise, the bathroom was empty. No one was there. She turned to leave, confused, but then something caught her eye. A figure standing just behind the shower curtain. The outline of a man's shape was faintly visible through the thin fabric. Her breath caught in her throat as she realized she was not alone. For a brief moment, Sarah stood frozen, not knowing what to do. Should she run? Should she scream? Her mind raced and panic crept up her spine. The man behind the curtain had not moved, nor did he make a sound. It was as if he was waiting for her to make the first move. Sarah slowly stepped back, her eyes never leaving the curtain. The floorboards creaked again, louder this time. She took a step forward and, with one hand shaking, reached for the curtain. As she pulled it back, she found the bathroom empty. There was no one hiding, no one lurking behind it. The feeling of being watched, however, was undeniable. Her pulse raced as she turned to face the door, wanting to leave but realizing she had no way out. The room was quiet, but something was different now. The air was thick, and the sense of danger was palpable. She checked the door, locked. She checked the windows, still locked. She checked the balcony, no one there either. But as she moved back toward the bed, she saw something that sent a cold chill down her spine. Her phone was missing. Sarah had left it charging on the bedside table before taking her nap, but now it was gone. In its place was a small note, scrawled in handwriting she did not recognize. The note simply read, "I know where you are." Her heart raced as the full weight of the situation hit her. The man in the bathroom had been in her room, and now her phone was gone. She had no way to contact her friends, and she had no idea who was in the room with her. The door was locked. The windows were secure, but the creeping sense of dread was overwhelming. Suddenly, Sarah heard a soft noise from behind her, a light, almost imperceptible tapping. She turned, expecting to see a reflection in the mirror, But there was nothing, just the sound. She couldn't figure out where it was coming from. The tapping grew louder and Sarah froze. It was coming from the walls, as if something was knocking from the other side. She moved closer to the wall, her heart pounding, and pressed her ear against it. The tapping stopped. Then, just as quickly as it had started, there was a loud thud on the floor, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps. It was then that Sarah realized she wasn't alone in the room. Someone was moving inside the walls, within the confines of the hotel. The noise was growing louder, the steps more deliberate. Whoever, or whatever, was inside. It was getting closer. In a blind panic, Sarah ran to the door, tried the handle again, but it wouldn't budge. She was trapped. She screamed for help, her voice echoing in the empty room, but the hotel was eerily silent. There was no response, no sign of life outside her door. Just as she was about to give up hope, the door suddenly rattled. A soft knock followed by a sharp tug on the handle. Someone was trying to get in. The moment of sheer terror when she thought the door would burst open and she would face whatever was lurking on the other side felt endless. But then, in an instant, the door opened. It wasn't an intruder. It was one of her friends, Sarah's relief flooding her chest as she saw familiar faces standing outside. They had come to check on her, just as they promised, but they didn't know what she had gone through. They had no idea about the strange tapping, the whispered message, or the feeling of being watched. They rushed in, asking if she was okay, and Sarah could barely speak through her racing heart. She was safe, but she would never be able to explain the horrors she had faced in that room. As they left, her friends reassured her that everything was fine. They would report the strange occurrences to the hotel staff, but there was no guarantee. The hotel would do anything. The next morning, Sarah and her friends packed up and checked out of the hotel, eager to put the terrifying experience behind them. The hotel's management seemed unfazed by the events, brushing off Sarah's concerns. The staff claimed there was nothing unusual about the room, and they assured the group that no one had entered the room after they left. However, when they left, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching them. As they walked to the lobby, she turned back one last time to look at the hotel. In the window, she could swear she saw a shadow. Not a person, just a shape that disappeared the moment she blinked. It was as though the hotel was still alive, still haunted, by something that never left. It was supposed to be a typical spring break for Emily and her college friends. They had chosen Panama City Beach for their vacation, excited to enjoy the warm sand and clear water, and eager to experience the lively nightlife that the area was famous for. After months of schoolwork, they were looking forward to a week of relaxation and fun. The group had been planning their trip for months. They had booked a spacious beachfront condo, packed their bags with sunscreen, swimsuits, and party outfits, and counted down the days until they could let loose. From the moment they arrived, everything was perfect. The weather was beautiful, the beach was pristine, and the parties were exactly what they had imagined. But as the days wore on, a sense of unease slowly began to creep in, though no one could put their finger on why. One night, Emily, who had always been more reserved than the rest of the group, decided she wasn't feeling up for another night of partying. The others, eager to continue their adventure, urged her to stay in and rest. She agreed, deciding to skip out on the festivities and take some time to relax in the condo. The plan was simple. The group would head out to the bars and clubs, and Emily would stay behind to get some much-needed sleep. They assured her they would check on her later, just to make sure she was all right. It seemed like a perfect arrangement until Emily vanished without a trace. When her friends returned to the condo later that night, they assumed Emily was already in bed resting as planned. But when they knocked on her door to check on her, they were met with silence. They opened the door to find the room empty. Her belongings were still there, her phone, her clothes, her shoes, but Emily was nowhere to be found. A cold, sinking feeling gripped their hearts as they realized something was wrong. They began calling out for her, but there was no response. They searched the entire condo, even checking the bathroom and balcony, but Emily was gone. Her phone was still in the room, and there were no signs of a struggle. The door was locked from the inside, and nothing seemed out of place. Panic set in quickly. Her friends rushed to the front desk of the condo, hoping the staff might have seen something, but the front desk had no answers. They checked the surveillance footage, but there was no sign of Emily after she had left the condo earlier that day. She was simply gone. Worried and desperate, the group contacted the police. The officers arrived at the condo and began asking questions, but there were no clear answers. The only thing they had to go on was the fact that Emily's phone had been left behind. Her friends could not understand how she could have disappeared so suddenly, especially without taking her phone or even her purse. It was as though she had vanished into thin air. The police scoured the area, questioning anyone who might have seen something, but no one knew anything. Days passed, and with each passing hour, the sense of dread grew stronger. The town, normally bustling with spring break activity, had turned, eerily quiet, as if the mystery surrounding Emily's disappearance was keeping everyone on edge. Then, 5 days later, the unimaginable happened. A call came in to the police from a small town nearly 200 miles away from Panama City Beach. A woman was found wandering the streets, confused and disoriented. When they took her to the local hospital, they discovered that she was Emily. She had been found in a near trance-like state, unable to remember where she had been or how she had gotten there. Emily had no recollection of what had happened during the days she was missing. She couldn't explain how she had traveled so far from Panama City Beach, or why she had been wandering in a daze. All she knew was that she had woken up in a field, far from any familiar landmarks. She had no idea how much time had passed, and she was terrified. The police and hospital staff struggled to make sense of her story. As they pieced together what happened, they learned that Emily had been drugged at the nightclub she visited earlier that night. She had been unknowingly slipped a substance that made her lose control of her body and mind. As the drug took effect, she wandered away from the club and out into the streets, not fully aware of what she was doing. She had been in a stupor for the entire time she was missing, with no memory of her actions. The mystery of how she ended up 200 miles away was never fully explained. There were no witnesses, and Emily's phone had remained off the entire time, making it impossible to track her movements. The authorities searched the area, but no one knew where she had been or who had been responsible for drugging her. The only thing they knew for certain was that Emily had been in a vulnerable state, and someone had taken advantage of her. Emily's friends were devastated by what had happened, but they were grateful that she was safe. After weeks of counseling and therapy, Emily began to remember snippets of what had happened to her during the time she was missing, but the full story never came together. She had been lucky. Some others might not have been so fortunate. As the weeks passed, Emily and her friends tried to move on from the terrifying experience. They were left with many questions and very few answers. How could they have let this happen? Could they have done something differently to protect her? The haunting question lingered. How did Emily end up so far from the safety of their condo? Every year, the students of East Coast University flocked to Myrtle Beach for their spring break getaway. For a group of friends, this trip was meant to be a relaxing escape from the pressures of finals and the hectic college life. The group had rented a small boat for the day, hoping to explore the nearby islands, enjoy the warm ocean breeze, and maybe even do some fishing. It was supposed to be the perfect day on the water. The group of friends consisted of 5 college students: Jack, Sarah, Emily, Michael, and Lucas. They had all been looking forward to the trip for weeks. Their boat was a modest vessel, nothing too fancy, but big enough for the group to spend the day on the water, drifting between islands and enjoying the fresh air. As they set sail, they were in high spirits, eager to see where the day would take them. The sun was shining, the ocean was calm, and everything seemed perfect. At first, everything went according to plan. They spent the morning floating between islands, laughing, joking, and snapping pictures. But as the hours passed, the sky began to change. The sun slowly started to dip lower in the sky, and the winds picked up. The water, which had been calm earlier in the day, began to churn with the wind, creating small waves that made the boat rock gently. It wasn't anything too alarming, but the group noticed the change in the air. As the day wore on, the boat began to malfunction. At first, it was a sputter, then a full stop. The engine died, and no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't get it to start again. The group was stranded in the middle of the ocean, with no land in sight. Panic began to set in as they realized they had no way of knowing how far from shore they were. They couldn't call for help, there was no cell service out on the water, and the boat's radio wasn't working. The friends tried everything they could think of, attempting to restart the engine, checking the gas levels, and even trying to paddle with the small oars they had on board. But no matter what they did, the boat wouldn't move. Time seemed to stretch endlessly as the boat floated aimlessly in the ocean. The wind was picking up, and the waves were starting to grow larger. The night was approaching, and they were nowhere near shore. With the situation becoming more dire, the group began to argue about what to do. Some wanted to stay with the boat, hoping someone would eventually find them. Others wanted to try and swim to shore, though the distance seemed impossible to estimate. They were all exhausted, dehydrated, and growing desperate. Just when they thought things couldn't get worse, they saw a boat on the horizon. The group